Welcome to Minus 20, the journey of an independent food business.
Hey folks, welcome back for another episode. I'm Walter here with Keith.
Hi there.
So in the first episode, we talked a little bit about how Keith actually got started with High Road. And we left it off with you guys in the old facility. And I thought what would be neat with the second episode is to pick it up. You guys, High Road Craft Ice Cream was only a food service brand.
Yes.
No intention of going into retail.
Never. In fact, we talked about that business plan competition.
Yeah.
And when we won,
Yeah.
one of the judges said, if you had mentioned retail, you wouldn't have even been in the top three.
Really?
Yes.
So they knew how brutal retail was.
Retail is such a bad idea that we would have been out immediately had you mentioned retail.
So
Here we are.
and here we are. So that person's probably laughing right now as he watches this. See, I told you.
Yeah.
But so what actually happened was kind of neat, and I was actually one of these people. Restaurants actually started putting on their menus, proudly serving High Road Craft ice cream.
That's correct.
And
And we didn't know.
Yeah.
We didn't ask for it. They did it. You know, it, like in anything else, you would name the source of the brand of your wine, or
Sure.
you buy a specialty cheese, you might mention it. So why not mention that it's High Road ice cream? And
right.
yeah, it ended up on menus all over the Southeast. It was really cool.
And then what happened was fans like myself started looking up in the phone book at the time and calling and saying, hey, can I come buy ice cream?
And we only made containers
the big
that
tub
big,
back
the
there.
big tub.
Yeah, the big tub back there.
And so the phone call cadence became so incessant.
We can be very annoying when we want to buy really good ice cream.
And I'm hospitable to a point, but I'm more of a back of the house guy. So at some point I just made up a story, since I was there Saturday cleaning up and coming up with new flavor ideas anyway.
Yeah.
I'll be here. I would say I'll be here from 10 to 2 on Saturday, and you can come buy ice cream then.
Yeah.
So we had a little folding table and a piece of white paper like this, and I would write 4 or 5 flavors on it, and I wrote $80 on a piece of other paper. I said 3 gallons, $80, and a short list of flavors. And I thought that would be enough to ward off the consumers.
Nope.
And it didn't work. And people started coming with their own coolers, their own dry ice. Bloggers started to come, video professionals, aspiring food entrepreneurs, engineers, just kind of startup geeks.
I mean, this was right on the leading edge of social media.
Yes.
Bloggers were out there, and of course we're all interconnecting, going, have you had this ice cream? Have you had this ice cream?
Yeah, and I was using, I'm not sure if it was Facebook or Twitter at the time, kind of regularly. It's probably Facebook.
Okay.
And had my phone and would just take pictures of what I was doing and share it.
Yeah.
In a very innocent, I don't know if anybody's out there in internet land listening.
Sure.
And it became a thing.
Yeah, and then the Saturday stores literally became a total thing where you would make flavors for various restaurants and whatnot, and then they would just run these extra pints
Yes.
of whatever they were making.
Yes.
And so we would show up, there'd be a big wall. These are all the flavors we have.
We would take big rolls of butcher paper and markers and just write stuff. My kids were small at the time, and it was a little family affair. And sometimes I'd have an employee or 2 there that I was training, and they'd get to connect with the earliest adopters of High Road.
And then we'd get the tour, which was a room like the size of what we're sitting in right now.
And I would talk to empty spaces like a delusional person. I remember I only had 1 batch freezer, a table, and a hardening cabinet. And I would just be like, this is where this fancy machine is going to go, and this is where I'm going to put my pasteurizers. but it was really just a blank spot on a plastic wall.
Yeah, but we were all, ooh.
Yeah.
And then...
Use your imagination.
Yeah, just use your imagination. And still, you're still not in retail. It was only in food service.
Yeah.
The Saturday factory store kind of became legend amongst the family, if you will, those of us who knew about it.
Yeah.
And we would start dragging other friends to it. And then one day, a buyer actually showed up that you didn't realize. Somebody from Whole Foods actually showed up.
Correct. So I was so busy making ice cream that I think my co-founder was, hitting the phones, trying to let people know we existed.
Sure.
And somehow, some way, he had connected with folks at Whole Foods Market. But, hey, we exist, I think was the extent of the sales pitch.
We make ice cream.
And these guys just showed up one Saturday, and we would retain all of our samples in these little 3.5-ounce cups so we could go back as we were iterating through each of the formulas we were creating, because we were very novice at ice cream mix formulation at the time. And we would go back and taste last week's version of bourbon burnt sugar, or, and just keep retaining these little 3.5-ounce cup samples. And those were really the only non-3-gallon samples I had in the building. So the guys showed up and, we want to taste a whole bunch of your flavors. And so I just brought this giant bin full of random crap thrown in a container. And laid them all out on the table, put spoons out, tempered them, got to know these guys. I still didn't know who the hell they were. They could have been, cashiers at Whole Foods. I had no idea. We're just hospitable, and if they were industry inside folks, if they were cooks or kitchen people, hey, maybe they want to be employees or part-timers here.
Right.
We had no idea who these guys were, so they tasted the product, and by the end they started speaking in kind of grocery lingo. I didn't know what the hell they were talking about, and at the end they're like, this would be great in our region. I don't know what that meant.
Yep.
And so by the end of the conversation, we basically had an agreement in principle to create a line of pints, which we promised ourselves we'd never do, for a Whole Foods Market for a region of which we didn't know what that meant, with equipment that we didn't have.
Okay.
So that's how you say yes and then figure it out. And so we did explain that we didn't have the equipment.
Right. And just in the state of Georgia, you cannot hand pack ice cream for retail.
Correct.
It has to be packed by a machine.
Right.
Okay.
And so we needed a machine.
They need a machine, a very expensive machine.
And I didn't have any money.
Okay. Which is why they didn't want to go into retail in the first place.
Correct.
They were happy doing the...
It's simple.
Yeah.
Simple ice cream for the chef community that we understood well.
So Whole Foods says, we want to put you in retail.
I need a machine, Mr. Whole Foods. And they said, well, how much does that cost? And, I recall having done some research. I said, I think an entry-level one's like $50,000. I don't have $50,000. They said, well, we can lend you $50,000. I said, I should have said $100,000. And, Whole Foods Market was kind enough, insightful enough to know that they could be very influential in incubating better food businesses, and made us an early part of their local producer loan program, and very benevolently and inexpensively and patiently provided the capital for us to purchase, our first industrial filler that was run by compressed air and a pedal, and we would sit on like a drummer's throne, and you'd grab off of a table a pint and put it under a single head on this acrylic spinner that would spin in circles because it had two hoppers, one for the caramel or the chocolate and one for the ice cream. And it never worked right. And it would fill like a quarter or a half or over the top. And so when the first time it came, we were all excited. We lined it up, put the lids on this spinner rolly thingy with the conveyor, and you had to pass the pint from one hand to the other hand to the conveyor down this thing, and it all looked like it was supposed to work well, but what happened the first time I did it is I stepped on the pedal and 5 gallons of caramel emptied onto my leg. The ice cream overflowed over the top of the container. I used many expletives. The whole team is ready to make like a couple thousand pints, and nothing is working. And all the ice cream sitting in like 5-gallon buckets ready to go into the hoppers.
Mm-hmm. Not happening.
No. And then we got the the filler to work properly. And so then we would hand down the line to this conveyor to the litter. And instead of putting the lid on, it would just knock the pint over and the ice cream would run out onto the belt. So we got to the point where someone would just stand there with a hot water hose and they would say "man down," and so what you'd hear constantly at High Road, like you'd hear "man down," "fuck, God damn it, man down," "man down," and for every 20 pints that we made, there were 100 in the trash can. And so,
not good odds.
Prudent use of early working capital.
Yeah, and for those of you watching this on video, you've been seeing some of the highlights. I actually was at the original factory filming one day for a little promo for you guys. I affectionately called it the I Love Lucy machine.
It was terrible.
It really was. Little foot pedal, pass it down, somebody catches it.
It actually should be illegal. It's like I want to bill back the company that made that thing for pain and suffering. And then you'd call them up and they'd go, "Well, Keith, you have to have a level on it 24 hours a day, and it runs perfectly here up at the factory when we run jelly beans through it." And then you actually tried to run real ice cream through it, and you had to call the suicide hotline 4 times a shift to keep yourself from, shutting your business down.
Just reinforcing why you didn't want to go into retail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a terrible idea. Don't do it.
Don't do it, because you'll end up building a bigger factory. It was so much fun to watch back then.
We eventually got it right, though.
Yeah, you did. Well,
Ish.
obviously.
But never enjoyed the... If anything is a semi-automatic, just keep saving your money to get the fully automated version. It's like having a car with a radio but no engine, and you could do the little Flintstones flap in the bottom. It was bad.
Was that just going back to Whole Foods? Was that kind of a unique thing for a grocer, or retailer, or somebody like that, actually having a loan program for small businesses?
It was the first and only that I was aware of, and the amount of autonomy that Whole Foods Global, which is their corporate headquarters, gave to their regional leadership was pretty impressive, and I think it led to Whole Foods having a really beautiful culture and providing literally dozens and dozens, probably hundreds and hundreds of startups to become viable around the country. I don't know how many ultimately benefited from the loan program, but I know a ton of startups in like the 2010 to 2014 era were just put on the map by Whole Foods. It was a big deal.
That's pretty cool.
They were like the CBGBs of food companies.
CBGB. I just watched that documentary with Alan Rickman.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he plays the guy who started CBGB.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good documentary.
Crystal.
Highly recommend that.
Nice.
Okay, so now we're in retail, and retail is working.
Do you want to know how we distributed the High Road?
I bet our audience really wants to know how you distributed this.
There was a new Whole Foods market opening up in advance of us getting the product to the distributor.
Okay.
And so we had to fill one store worth of product amidst this caramel explosion debacle. And so we were the last product on the shelf. They were calling us and threatening to put something else in our spot because we couldn't get the damn ice cream done in time.
Okay.
So we got there at 11 p.m. as they were ready to shut the door and then open the next day, grand opening. Right. And we bribed the security guard with Baconators from Wendy's. That's true. And I'm real hungry. I want to go. What would you like? I'm like, go get him Baconators.
Whatever he wants.
So which is sort of the irony that we were putting probably the most fattening, sugar-laden product on the shelves at Whole Foods Market while bribing a
guard with Baconators.
With Baconators. But my wife, and my 2 children. In fact, I let my kids put the products on the shelf. So our first shelf stocking was by my son was probably 7 or 8 at the time.
Wow.
It's really cool. There's a photo
really
around
cool.
somewhere.
Is there?
Yeah, Nikki might have one.
If we find it, you're seeing it right now. For those of you who watch.
If not, I will do a stick drawing.
A stick drawing of what Jackson looked like at the time, and Madison placing it up there. Yeah, we can reenact it right now.
With a big smile.
Jackson, by the way, is now going to be an opera singer. He's in college in Boston. That's how long ago this was.
Yeah.
And Madison is a business major locally.
She's 21. She graduates in a couple months. Works in sales here at High Road.
So that's how long all of this has been going on.
Yep.
Quite a while now. Okay, so now we're in retail. Things are rolling.
Yep.
And then you're basically going to get kicked out of your home.
Yes. So this was sometime in 2013. I had an office with an IKEA futon in it because it wasn't uncommon. In fact, I probably slept there 3 out of 7 days a week.
If you're going to start a company, it's 24/7. You don't turn off the clock when you go home.
No. Yeah. I would say I work 7 days a week, 18 hours a day.
So this is 3 years in, 2013.
Yeah.
3 years in, you're in the original facility.
Yes. And so I'm waking up one morning in my office, and I open the blinds, I hear some noise out in the parking lot, and there's a surveyor out, like kind of doing what the land grading is going to look like. And trees being marked with these plastic bows. Sure. And I said, I don't think this is a memorial going on here. I think, the economy was still kind of crummy at the time, and I think the property had been foreclosed upon. I didn't know I was just a renter.
I gotcha.
And someone had purchased the property. And a couple days later, we got you're one of the last standing businesses. That light industrial park was basically vacant, except for us and like a collections agency, and then some drug dealers behind the dumpsters. Was effectively
so you could get your ice cream with something extra.
Our business community. We had a small chamber of commerce, and so it was at that point lucky enough to have a very good friend who understood the nature of where High Road was at in its life cycle, and was very familiar with how to raise capital for that particular growth stage of a business's life, and kindly did some calling around for us, and we stumbled upon a very, very cool guy who ended up being a primary investor for a family office that provided capital at a very, very critical time in our history. I don't know if we would have made it. I mean, maybe we would have moved, opened an ice cream shop, but I don't know that we would have scaled without the serendipity of meeting the person who knew about raising money. And the family office gentleman who so kindly believed in what High Road was all about. And a handful of $1 million later, and some negotiations, and the typical lengthy process that goes into raising real money like that. We had secured this property in Marietta, beautiful, again, light industrial space.
Right.
And started building an ice cream plant in the late spring of 2014.
And what all went in? Because you got a very successful business running in the original space, and now you're going to have to uproot. You're not only moving, but you're adding more equipment. You're expanding capabilities. What was that like from a business standpoint? I mean, there's a lot of companies, I'm sure, especially in the food space. You're a small company, you're growing, you're kind of like at that point where you're kind of outgrowing your space, but you're scared to take that leap because if I overgrow and I don't. So what was involved in actually, and what was your mindset saying, okay, not only am I going to move, but I'm going from what, like 5,000 or 6,000, 10,000 square feet? And this building
max. I mean, the manufacturing space was probably just a few thousand square feet.
Yeah, and this is a 75,000 square foot building, just to give you a sense of the scale. Less than 10,000 square foot up to 75,000. That's a big jump.
Yeah.
So what is your mindset there? Because obviously you had a lot of faith that not only are we going to move, but I need a lot of space because we're going to expand.
Well, my belief was the economics are you either scale or fail.
Okay.
Right, and if you don't achieve that critical top line volume, the economics of running a food manufacturing business don't really make sense. You have to make a lot of something if you're going to price it in a mainstream fashion.
Okay.
And so, it was either we're doing this or we're not. And I guess from my personality is that I don't do anything halfway. Was lucky enough to surround myself with some very, very wise advisors. There are a lot of just kind souls out there who believe in entrepreneurs, who show up and offer counsel, advice, help, oftentimes for really nothing in return other than the intellectual and human joy of helping one another.
Yeah.
I've got a skill and I'm glad to allow you to put it to use.
So what for anybody watching this who is at that critical point where I'm going to scale, what's your biggest piece of advice for that person who's going to take that next step to scale? 2, what was your biggest surprise or your biggest challenge that you were not expecting when all of this happened?
Wow. I think I had anticipated, number one, that building an industrialized plant with much larger and more sophisticated equipment was going to come with a pretty steep learning curve. But I never really understood the level of skill required to be a machine operator. I thought that you bought equipment, you spent a lot of money on the equipment, and the equipment made your life easier. That's not the case. This equipment is very challenging to operate. It's like, you have a NASCAR, you just get in it and start driving it. It requires a certain amount of expertise and a knack and an interest. And I realized really fast, I can't stand machines. I have no interest in them. I have no, I like what they do. Sure. I like the fact that I can make more product.
Sure.
But I don't like running them. I'm not a tinkerer. I'm not a handyman. I'm more of a, creative type. I'm better off in the R&D lab than on the manufacturing floor for sure.
Yeah.
And so, looking back, I wish I would have found one person that just loved machines and knew machines. And we were a pack of chefs and designers trying to run very sophisticated equipment. And when we would call the, oh shit hotline, like this thing isn't working at 2 a.m, all of the questions that these technicians would ask of us, we didn't even understand the lingo, right? And so we were significantly fish out of water at that juncture, but you know what? You plow through and you learn things that may be outside of your normal realm of interest, but you become more of a Renaissance person by figuring it out.
And then what would be your biggest piece of it? Obviously that was a huge challenge. Now, to anybody who's ready to take that next step, I've got my small, especially food-based business, and I'm going to take that next step. Consider something that they need to consider, your best piece of advice before they make that leap.
Raise twice as much money as you think you need right away.
Okay.
twice as much. Assume when you're modeling, when you're doing your financial models, your pro forma, so to speak, assume you're going to make a lot more mistakes than the model reflects when you're being rosy. Starting a manufacturing facility from scratch requires some cash burn so that you can figure out how to run your equipment.
Wow. And so you made a successful move up to here. We're going to stop it there because the next thing that happens in the history of High Road is actually you go from running one company to actually buying another. And that's called really growing up, you know. He doesn't know what he's doing with machines anyway, so why don't we buy another company?
Sounds great.
Yeah. So we'll pick up in the next podcast with that part of the story. So I
do want to caveat that I've hired some very bright people.
Because he wouldn't have been able to do this all by himself, for sure. No, I mean, you know, I think you just brought up a great point, though, is you can't know everything, and you've got to hire people who are smarter than you.
Yes, and to be humble enough to just allow people to be out front in the spotlight, in their lane, be the decision maker. As the CEO doesn't have to know it all, do it all. They have to set the tone for the organization and certainly have the general overall category and financial acumen, but you know, you don't need to be the NASCAR driver.
No, and I think that's a really important point as you grow to understand you don't have to be everything.
No.
You do want to hire the right people.
Yeah.
But then turn over their duties and let them do what they need to do.
Right.
You keep running the company.
Yes. You do have to be infinitely curious, though, just because, you know, I'm not naturally machine inclined, but that did not permit me to be completely disinterested in all things industrial. You have to learn.
Right. So with that, we'll stop here because the next step is High Road Craft Brand owning another company and really growing up.
Yes.
Yeah, so thanks for joining us. I'm Walter, this is Keith. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us here on Minus 20.